Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Thank you for watching us on the YouTube channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, listening to us on Facebook or one of the many outlets like Google Play and iTunes, and heard now in 17 countries as well as throughout the U.S. A man who's probably been to every country we're listened in is Tom Ludt, a well-known and respected executive in horse racing, from the Breeders' Cup to Santa Anita, and now the president of Phoenix Thoroughbreds, and he joins us from somewhere out in Southern California. Tom, my friend, thanks for being on with me.
It's a pleasure to be on here. I'm glad to see you're doing so well.
Yeah, this has been fun to catch up with old friends and talk a little bit about it. And I think, Tom, that there's even people that hang around the track that are out there, online betting every day, like my cousin Johnny, that, they hear about people, but they don't get to talk to them or hear from them other than, read something in the form or keep up with the horse itself. So I think it's kind of good to get people together, and that's kind of what you're doing now with Phoenix Thoroughbreds, right? In a different kind of way, yeah.
Yeah, it's an organization that sprouted out of the ground just less than 3 years ago, and boy, have we grown.
Wow, I mean, it's like a phoenix. It not only has it risen, it's taken flight here.
Yeah, listen, it's something that people probably don't understand the magnitude of the size, because in 3 years we're up over 300 horses because we're so worldly, and I think a lot of people probably don't follow the Australian market or even as much the European market, but it's been a great challenge, and I am traveling all over the world.
And I believe this is right. Like Phoenix, unlike some that started here in the States, this actually did not start in the U.S. Is that right?
Yeah, Amr Abdulaziz, who started Phoenix, is Dubai-based, and it was his plan from before my time, and he set this thing up as an investment fund, which makes it quite unique. I don't get really involved in that part of it, but it is an investment fund where he's trying to bring people into the game, much like you see in these racing syndicates, but we're just very larger and more diversified, I think, than most funds or racing partnerships.
And that, I was going to say, that isn't even the future now of racing. It is the current of racing, and probably will continue on, that there's going to be like investment groups or some kind of group ownership. I'm not sure how many individual owners or individual farms we're going to see in the next 5 or 6 years with horses.
Yeah, and if you notice that the sales results at Keeneland, you're seeing more and more people partner up, which, when I ran Vinery, Tommy Simon was the owner, and he was very reluctant to do that because, traditionally, and it's just in general terms, a lot of these wealthy individuals want to have control and do their own thing, and that kept the market extremely high. Not that it wasn't extremely competitive this year, but you're seeing, people that would have bought these horses individually teaming up, which is kind of restricting a little bit at the top, but probably making it healthier for everybody long term.
Well, I was going to ask if there's the end game, obviously, is to keep getting good horses, try to get out to the track, try to win some races. But I don't know if there's really much of a downside in this, because, if I want to put up so much money, then basically I'm only going to lose so much money as if I'm investing in the whole enchilada, basically.
Well, that's exactly right. And I've tried to convince Amr to continue to do more of that. I mean, it allows you to spread your risk into more horses. I mean, this is unfortunately a numbers game, no matter how hard you work at it. If you look at the best of the best, I mean, the best trainers are winning at 30%. The best horses don't even win at that. Very few go undefeated. So if you look at this game and you back it up and you look at how to best, put together a business model, I believe partnerships is a wise move. It just allows you to spread your risk. And listen, I was very fortunate at Vinery when we hit with More Than Ready, and how many of those horses come along. They cover a lot of bad decisions, or the horses that just don't pan out for you.
Yeah, it's an attrition game, no doubt, isn't it? You just got to. That's one of the reasons I guess they call it the sport of kings, isn't it? I mean, you and I could probably buy a horse, and we may get lucky. We may be the Sakatoga stable boys and have Funny Side for what, $16,000 or something like that, maybe. But for the most part, you're going really against the odds.
Well, and that's exactly it. I mean, this is the game that does bring equality to the bidding. I mean, at the end of the day, if money bought the game, it would have been controlled. But it is a sport of kings from a volume standpoint. But what makes this game great is, it's funny looking back. I was just reading where that maiden 16 claimer that Maximum Security and the other horse both ran in that race. I read the article. It said it might be the most famous $16,000 claiming race ever. So, I mean, that's the dream. If you claim the horse like that and you end up with something that's worth millions of dollars, it brings people into this game, because once the horse is bought, it's all equal when you get on the track.
Talking with Tom Ludt. He's been from the Breeders' Cup, president of Vinery at Santa Anita, now president of Phoenix Thoroughbreds. From the many experiences you've had in horse racing, Tom, was this something you thought you'd be doing at an executive level at a relatively young age you'd get started like you did?
I would have never believed I'd be traveling the world buying horses for an international syndicate group. That's for sure. A guy from Youngstown, Ohio, spending time in Australia, Ireland, France, England, and all over the States, and now obviously companies based in Dubai. It's quite the whirlwind.
What have you noticed? Is there similarities with U.S. racing? Not particularly the surfaces, I realize that, but like the ownership groups, and is there kind of a common thread that'll link from the U.S. to Dubai to Australia, people that are interested in the sport?
No, that's probably the hardest thing that I've had to adapt to. I mean, if you pick on Australia, like right now, all our 2-year-olds are being broken, and they do these trials that are not official races.
Mm-hmm.
And they just race very differently. They'll race intensely for maybe 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, and then they'll turn them out. So it's very, very different in Europe or in Australia. It is all turf, but they'll run them and then they'll give them breaks. And you'd like to think that's probably healthy for the horses, but it's not something that can really be done anymore in America, although you can always give a horse's layup. But, living out here in California, all of our facilities have kind of disappeared. It's just because of the value of land. But so Australia is very different. America's got so much racing and there's so much ability to ship around now.
Yeah.
So it's very different. And then in Europe, you talk about the sport of kings, you got to have a tough wallet over there, because unless you get to the top level, you're running for very small numbers. I mean, these maidens are $10,000 pounds over there. So it's challenging when you're spending the money equivalent to the money here and running for those purses in Europe. So they're very, very different, and it takes a while to change your brain when you go to different markets.
Is it different emphasis as well? I mean, speed is such a thing now, breeding for speed in the U.S. Do you see that as much in Europe and the rest of the world?
Not in Europe. In Europe, it's really, I mean, I'd say that they're probably slowly getting into that way, but it's such a different race. They tend to rate and wait, and they run late, where in Australia, it's all speed. I find it fascinating that the biggest race in the world down there is the Melbourne Cup, and yet they love 5-furlong 2-year-old speed, and it's a long race. Same thing here, though. If you look at it, if you ask any owner, what do they want to win? They want to win the Kentucky Derby, 1.25 miles, and yet we continue to breed for speed.
Yeah. I think that has
crazy.
I know. I think that a lot to do, too, with horses that don't hold up as well. But, that's an unscientific approach. I know everybody can debate that, why you don't have. But it also, the breeding business is so lucrative now. It's just almost impossible for a good 3-year-old to come back as a 4-year-old. Forget 5-year-old, isn't it? Just because of the money that's on the table. Well,
yes, and then I will tell you, I'm quite intrigued by, I think, the Pegasus, and I think the Saudi World Cup. Obviously, we're a worldly based company, but
yeah.
when you look at that, and then you look at the Dubai World Cup, and you look at the purse structure in Kentucky, and I've had this conversation recently, I think it's encouraging that you can keep horses in training now, and especially if you have a great horse, you can make as much money racing, which I think will help our industry as much as you can in the breeding shed. So I think there's a small turn to that, which I think is very healthy. I will tell you, Australia racing, I love, and it's very lucrative down there. Their purse structure is extremely strong. And you're seeing that really. I mean, it's one of my concerns living in California. I mean, I'm from Kentucky, but
right.
The California market's really being challenged because obviously we've had some issues out here. And at the same time, this Kentucky and New York market is so strong, and Oakland's going to even be stronger again. So the supplemental money makes it very difficult on states that don't have it to be competitive.
Well, you mentioned California. I want to bring this up because I know you used to be with the Stronach Group and with Santa Anita, and we know all about their problems, and they're still going to keep the Breeders' Cup. They voted unanimously, the Breeders' Cup did, to keep it there. I thought that was big to kind of give the seal of approval. I think it would have been just awful for racing in what's been a terrible publicity year to not have the races at Santa Anita.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, I'm no expert on it, but being so involved in the industry, we're under such a microscope in California, much more than I think we would be in what I would consider more friendly equine states of Kentucky and New York. So it was a statement of, confidence, and it was giving the Californians and hopefully the thoroughbred industry a vote of confidence to do that. And let's just hope we have a great weekend.
And some crazy things happen, like the whole deal that came out, and we discussed this last week with Mary Scalay and Graham Motion about the whole deal that came out with Justify, 14 months, 15 months after he won the Triple Crown. I'm just kind of amazed somehow that these stories get the run that they do. It's gone now for the most part, but he got 2 or 3 days of big build-up about old conspiracy theorists coming out and everything else. Sometimes I think horse racing almost eats its own. I'd like to see somebody come out and say, you know how nuts this is? 600 nanograms and an 1,100-pound horse? Let's break it down first before we delve more into this.
Yeah, it's probably the biggest challenge, I think, for our industry. The good news is I was busy at the sales, so I didn't get caught up in reading all that stuff, because I always think that we now have a media game that it's a race to first without necessarily having the whole story. Now, the story broke many months later, but I never really got the whole details. But I think it's funny you bring that up. I've always said this, especially the last few years. We're the only industry that seems to love to promote all the negativity and not the positive. And it just, I just would love to see us come together. And, there's always been this talk about a commissioner or some kind of home office. And I just think it's something that we're missing. I mean, I just read where, I forget the singer now, she was going down to the Melbourne Cup, and she's not going now because the animal rights activists got after her.
Yeah, we were talking about Taylor Swift, who's probably as big a name as anybody in the entertainment world. And it looks like that's the reason she's not going to do the Melbourne Cup is the PETA pressure and these groups that I think are just, for good that they do, they ignore so many other good things. And I think they forget how many people are involved in horse racing behind the scenes. Everybody's not the multimillionaire. You got all the track workers and things. And to me, sometimes PETA dismisses that jobs will be gone if they try to abolish horse racing like they want to.
Well, that to me is the epitome of our challenge, because I think you're exactly right. I mean, I look at, you look at the NFL with the concussion issues, whatever that was 3 or 4 years ago, and there were people saying the NFL's over and what's thriving. And I think it's exactly right. We don't have a unified message. I mean, listen, unfortunately, we have horses break down, but, airplanes crash, people have car accidents. There are issues, and you're starting to see horse racing infomercials getting out there, but it's on such a small basis of all the things we do with just a national or international campaign of exactly what you said. The people in this industry, the love for animals, the jobs, the economy issues, but we don't have a unified body. And that's one of these things, especially in America, just the fact that we're not regulated by one body and we don't have a unified message, it hurts us, because these other organizations, PETA included and many other ones, they're very, very focused. They have a mission and they stick to the mission, and we're all over the place, and therefore we get beat up, in my opinion.
Talking with Tom Ludt, who's president of the Phoenix Thoroughbreds. He's worked with the Breeders' Cup, was president at Vinery, maybe when I first met him several years ago. Worked at Santa Anita, is well known in the industry throughout the world. And so, these are issues that I think are very important right now. One of the things I hope comes out of the New York Times story, and I can't blame, the New York Times ran the story, okay? A guy on the California Horse Racing Board out there gave them the story, so they ran it. You can't get mad at the messenger always. But what I would hope would happen, Tom, and kind of I think we're on the same path here is, like you say, I'm not sure we'll ever have a commissioner, but wouldn't it be nice to at least get together some of the more respected vets and people in racing and have like a board that at least would have unified rules for drug testing? And it's pretty transparent, but when stories like comes out, about last week, it looks like there's something to be hidden all the time. Like there's still this under the table thing that's going to happen that nobody's supposed to know about. And I think if they had some kind of board where everybody, like California, Arkansas, Louisiana, New York, Kentucky, Florida, whatever, they had the same rules for regulating medicine, would be huge.
And listen, I think it's our biggest challenge. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I know you're a big sports guy. I'm a big sports guy. And you look at, I remember when the NBA started talking about getting into the gambling, and you think about professional sports in Nevada and the changes. I mean, God rest his soul, Bob McNair gave a speech back many years ago, and I was in the TOBA board about the forward pass decision in the NFL. And I thought it was interesting how he related to adapting to today's world. And we're not. I mean, I was at a dinner last night, and I was telling somebody who ran the track, and never thought about this. You go to Vegas, if you're a big bettor, you got credit. The track business is 100% cash. And there's just so lack of innovation. And you look at I've got children that are in their 20s, that everything's Venmo and on the phone. And we're still a business that's printing the racing form and charging for it. And the lack of innovation is really throttling our business, in my opinion. But yet you look at the sales this past 2 weeks and it was phenomenal. So there's always hope. I just wish that we could give up control, and that there's been initiatives set out there. I know the Jockey Club's got one, NTRA had one, Toba's had one, but we've yet to let the gauntlet down and say, you know what, we're going to give a governing body the authority to make us great. And until that happens, we're going to continue to have these struggles.
No, I totally agree. I told one of the guys that was in the NTRA one time, was asking me about my cage fighting coverage. I said, well, it's MMA, and trust me, MMA's getting paid millions of dollars, first by Fox, now by ESPN, to show them. They're paying them. They're not having to be underwritten. And I said, in some ways, you need a guy like Dana White. Not totally, but, when MMA first started, and they would ask Dana all this stuff, he came right back at him. He never apologized for their sport. I think racing, I would at least take that model, not as profane and not as in your face, but quit apologizing for horse racing. I think that's the way that the leaders should start approaching it, in my opinion.
I agree, and it's a hot button. And I'm not a NASCAR guy, but you look what happened when Dale Earnhardt crashed. I would assume the largest figure in NASCAR, and it was very unfortunate. So they made dramatic changes, and I'm sure there were negative people or negative thoughts out there, but I assume NASCAR is still doing well. And you look at the changes that take place in any industry. Look what Uber's done to the taxi service. There's just so many things. And then you look at our changes. Our changes are minor tweaks. And we just sooner or later are going to have to realize, to be in front of people, it's television. I learned this when I got on the Breeders' Cup board. Unfortunately, people don't know this, but we pay to be on television, other than the Triple Crown.
Yeah.
Where every other sport gets paid millions of dollars to advertise. And it's because eyeballs. And we're losing those eyeballs, and eyeballs drive advertising. And these are changes that are drastic. They're not going to be easy, and it's going to be painful for some. But you bring up that Dana White. I think it's just hilarious that I'm from originally Youngstown, Ohio, where boxing was big. And I don't know my years, but maybe 15 years ago, boxing was becoming not cool or barbaric, and it was going to be faded away. Now we have MMA, which is brutality on television, selling like crazy. So anything's possible.
Well, here's my take on it. When some of the horse people ask me, of course, I cover basketball too and a few other things, but I am known for some of the MMA for a show we did on Mark Cuban's network for a long time. And like I said, if the fight's lousy, there's going to be another one in 15 minutes. And trust me, young people don't want to come and wait at the racetrack for 30 minutes between a show. They may like stats and all, but they can look that up on their phone. Now, I realize for those of us who are not so tech savvy like me, you like that 30 minutes between the races. It doesn't bother you. But, young people, I don't care how many pretty faces are on TV and how happy everybody is at the track and all the social part, and that's very important. But I do think there's got to be a way to come up with apps or something else and move the action on for young people, in my opinion.
Well, and, there's a lot smarter people than me out there, and I agree with you. But I do think we've missed the boat for years of allowing people to understand you can come to horse racing and as entertainment.
Yeah.
There can be the social life. And, some of these, if you go down to the big races, I've always wished we'd have a big Saturday once a month in America and just focus on it.
Yeah.
Just to drive the eyeballs and make it bucket list events. People always talk about the Kentucky Derby and
always,
the Breeders' Cup. And I just think those are the ways you have to start. But people have to know that you can come and not bet or lay down a few dollars and get lucky. And we need to promote the gambling of it. For so many years, I think we've hidden that horse racing's gambling.
Yeah.
And gambling's taking over America. You're damn near a casino of some sort within a couple hours anywhere in the United States.
Yeah, and you can start making sports bets at a couple of 3 states outside of Nevada now. You can go in and lay. You can go in and lay or take the points this weekend.
Look at someone like you that. Knowing you said a few years ago, I don't want to age you, buddy, but it's been a lot more than a few years ago.
But we were kids, Tom. Both of us. We were kids, yes.
But look at what you've exposed yourself to. Would you have ever thought the sports that you get involved in, and look at the diversity and the experience that you have. And do we ever come to you and ask you, What do you think makes this sport work different? We don't ever get outside of our box, and that's what I think is the challenge for horse racing.
No, I appreciate that, Tom. And to be honest, I think guys like you and me should be running some of these boards. And I'm
I
serious.
did that for a while.
Well, I know
I
you don't need that.
It's a lot of work.
You don't need that. I would love to have some input, not from an egotistical standpoint, but like you say, because I remember I was up in Edmonton, Alberta, doing an MMA fight, and sadly it was after the 8 Bells tragedy at the Derby. This guy comes up to me. He's probably 6'4". He's going to be he's a heavyweight fighter, probably like 230, all tatted up and just, a brute of a guy. And I'm thinking, wonder why he's approaching me for. And he comes up and he said, man, I broke down when that filly went down. I cried. And I thought, now you'd see this guy, and most of these horse racing guys, and some of them are still ambulatory, but let's face it, some of them aren't. They'd be sitting around and look at a guy like that and just poo-poo him for the way he looks. And, there's a lot of guys out there that like animals. They just like horses and dogs, and, they watch races. They may not know anything about it, but they like the sport. And that's what I try to get across.
Well, and I think, there's some momentum going. It's just on such a small basis, but you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, people love animals, and it's just a sad situation that people don't believe that the quality of care that goes into it. We get one bad apple, which there's a bad apple in every industry in the world.
Right.
I mean, but we get one bad apple, and that's all you read about, instead of the thousands of people that get up and work hard labor because they love these animals. And, you and I see it because I'm on the backside all the time, and you go to these farms, but we just for some reason haven't been able to reach out and expose that because we get throttled into the negativity. And it's just a shame, because the beauty of horses is just magnificent. That's why I love it so much.
And going to the Mahoning Valley River Club. I went there. I was calling Ohio Valley Conference basketball games back in the 80s when I was a kid. And I remember they took me there, and we had great Italian food, and we played bocce ball in the back. And there was a life-size poster of Ray Boom Boom Mancini. And up in the corner of that was a postcard-sized picture of the Pope. And several years later, I had the pleasure of working with Ray on some fight series that we were doing on NBC. And I mentioned to him that, and he said, yes, he had been there several times, and yes, he had seen that picture. And I said right away, Mancini is bigger than the Pope here in Youngstown. I love this place.
And that's exactly right. I used to watch him as a kid. He used to fight in the gyms down there. For a while there, he was living out here in Santa Monica. He's now back in Youngstown. But it's just, he's a classic story of what boxing did, and we have that in horse racing. We just need, I hate to preach about it, but we just need a central body that's driving this message like every other major sport does. I mean, I made a joke about it the other night. I was at a Dodgers game. I'm not a baseball guy, but you go there and 80% of the people have some kind of Dodgers gear on. The stadium is full.
Yeah.
And horse racing to me is so much more enjoyable. But, we all have our passions. We just have to drive people to be exposed to it to see if it becomes their passion.
Yeah, and I think telling the stories, I still think a lot of it is telling people stories, letting them know about people. And then you got either rooting for or against interest. You're going to either root for Bob Baffert or against him, or for Pletcher or against him, or John Velasquez. I think the human element is always going to be there. The great horses, like I've had friends ask me, what happened to Justify? Well, trust me, the money that was put on the table, they retired him. He ain't going to ever make that.
You're right.
But Baffert's going to be back. Pletcher's going to be back. Pick your, Chad Brown is going to be back. You got to pick your spots there, I think.
Well, I agree, and there's nothing wrong with rooting against just to win or lose. I mean, look at sports. I mean, that's what it's all about. You have people that love the Cowboys or hate the Cowboys.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Bob, we have horses with Bob. I have horses with Steve. I've had horses with Chad. It's okay to say you're going to root for them or against them. That's just part of the game, and that's what drives competition. It's what drives gambling. Let's face it, you're betting for or betting against.
Yeah,
that's just the way it is.
Yeah, it's really not personal when there's money involved, is it?
That's exactly right.
Hey, Tom, I know you got to head overseas, right, for Phoenix Thoroughbreds this week. You're on the go always.
Yep. Head out Friday for the golf sale in Ireland, then straight over to England for the Tattersall sales. So it's nonstop with Team Phoenix.
Well, listen, I really appreciate your time and love to have you come back on, and we'll catch up again soon, I hope.
Anytime, Kenny. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Tom Ludt, what a wonderful guy. Been a great executive on many levels. President of Phoenix Thoroughbreds. We'll be back with more of the Horse Racing Show right after this.